Welcome to Lead Smarter, the podcast where you'll hear powerful, no nonsense conversations about leadership with today's top experts and real world leaders like yourself. Get the inside strategies, insights, and secrets they've learned on the journey to lead smarter. Let's dive in.
What if the biggest myth you were taught about leadership is that you're supposed to be managing the people you lead? On today's episode of Lead Smarter, I'm joined by Chuck Blakeman, serial entrepreneur, global advisor, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author of Making Money is Killing Your Business and Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. Chuck's built 13 businesses across 4 continents and has made it his mission to rehumanize work by giving people their brains back. In this conversation, Chuck throws haymakers at outdated leadership models and makes a data-backed case for why management might be the biggest obstacle to real performance. We're talking distributed decision-making, the death of micromanagement, and how to scale without creating a top-down mess. If you're a founder, team leader, or just tired of the corporate BS, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Hey, Chuck, thank you for jumping on the call with me and joining us for the Lead Smarter podcast. It's been really fun getting a chance to talk with you. We've had a chance to connect a few times now. You've sent me several of your books, one which is new, which we will talk about towards the end of the podcast that I don't have yet, but I'm looking forward to. But I really would like to talk to you about your expertise in leadership, about the things that you've been doing in leadership for the past, I don't want to age
Way
you. So I'm
too
not going to
long.
I won't even talk about how long you've been doing it, but you're doing it long enough that you've been able to be on TED Talks, that you've been able to write several books about it. And as we were just talking about before we jumped on, you've been able to do things that people feel is counterintuitive, but you've described that as an inaccurate identification of what you're actually doing. So leading into that, speaking of things that seem counterintuitive, but maybe are just counter
Logic.
logical. Yes, counter logical was the term, which I've not heard before, by the way. So you mentioned when we talk that leadership and management have nothing to do with each other. And you're the only one who's I've heard say this, but I'm sure that maybe you've coined the concept, but I would love to hear. Please tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, sure, David. It's great to be with you. I'm excited. I feel like you're kind of a brother from another mother. You get this stuff. um, you get it. You intuitively you get it. I thought I came up with this myself, and I've stopped thinking that I've had any original ideas. I'm pretty sure I never have, but I'm okay with that because I'm pretty sure nobody else has either. We're taking things that are out there and maybe reforming them in a way that sound new. They sound like, wow, that's a new thought. So I thought I had come up with this myself after observing and running 13 businesses in 10 industries on 4 continents. I thought there's nothing in common about leadership and management. I got to write this down because I've just experienced this for decades, and these things are vastly different. There's a reason why we have 2 different words. And then I found this guy at Harvard, Harvard professor John Cotter, who says leadership and management have nothing in common. So I'm not alone, and there are other people. There's not a lot of them. But there's also all the data. The data is all on our side. So it's kind of fun trying to have an argument with someone who thinks that management and leadership, somehow in the middle, like on the edges, they're very different. But by the time you get to the middle, they're the same thing. There's not a thing that's the same about leadership and management. Totally different things, and we can demonstrate that as we go.
Yeah, and I mean, if I remember correctly, that's kind of where the distributed decision making you've talked about comes from. And when you say there's no overlap between leadership and management, I've heard you talk about situations where people that will reach out to you or they'll like butt heads with you in social media or things like
Yeah.
that. You've actually had some interesting stories. Where have you seen or where have you experienced clashes with that concept that
Well, I think just about everywhere. I would say that most of my journey got kickstarted. The light went on, I don't know, a few decades ago when I realized I looked around at my own business and the businesses of just about everybody else in the world and realized, the factory system, the industrial age factory system is alive and well in every company. Google, it doesn't matter how fancy you think you are operating on an industrial age factory system. And in fact, this could be a rant all on its own, but the technology sector in America is probably the most archaically structured environment I've ever been around. I did consulting for Google, and I was on a very short consulting because I was going to tell them to go somewhere else, not that place, but I was going to tell
sure.
a different direction, and they didn't want it. But I can't believe how top down and hierarchical and political and all these things that the guys in ties making decisions for everybody else, top down decision making. We get the information to flow up, we do the decisions down, and all this stuff
Right.
that's basically a pyramid scheme, David. That's all it is. And I ask people when I do speak engagements, why are pyramid schemes illegal? And they all say, oh, it's because the pyramid scheme uses the people at the bottom to benefit the people at the top. Welcome to corporate America. It's just a pyramid scheme. That's all it is. And it's just so archaic. And the cool thing is, David, it doesn't have to be that way. People who want to defend it think that if we do something flatter
Right.
with lots of that nonsense, that it'll be too egalitarian, it'll move too slow, and it'll be earthy, crunchy, and you'll have to get a kimono or something, and you'll lose money.
Yep.
I had a discussion with Jim Collins, one of the most data driven people I ever met. Good to Great, his big book, and he told me, on this year long discussion we had that this was nonsense. That I kept that the leadership and management are absolutely the same thing, and here's why. But all of his stuff, he never gave a single bit of data. He would just give me emotional. Here's a guy who's all data driven, but he wouldn't give me any data because there isn't any. The data says that if you lead people instead of manage them, everything gets better. So I've seen that clash throughout corporate America, and most of the largest companies in America are that way. Thankfully, there's enough to know that what we're talking about here is not odd. It's not an outlier. It's not some freakish thing. I can give you hundreds of giant corporations with thousands to tens of thousands of people and thousands of smaller ones that have been doing this since the 50s. It's not this brand new thing. And all the data is on their side. Here's just an example, David. Is a Fortune magazine, best places to work. I can't remember who that is that does that. But for the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
yeah, Fortune, maybe it's not them, but the best places to work thing for the last 25, 30 years, as long as they've been running it, like 85% of the companies that have been on their entire time, it's only like 15 companies who have made it every year. Most
Right.
of them are companies that do not ascribe to the industrialized factory system top-down thing. They've blown it up. They don't have managers anywhere. They have leaders, but they don't have managers. So the data is all on our side.
You've actually so you brought up a point, like, we've had several conversations. I've read at least part of one of your books now that I'm trying to finish before, you tell me what the ending is on that. But, one of the things that you talk about and we've had conversations about is the difference between leadership and management. You're saying right now that there's no overlap, but, maybe for our listeners that were not in all of our conversations, how would you define the difference between how would you separate those terms, leadership and
Well
management?
well, there's a fairly classic definition of management. It's basically using authority to command and control for the benefit of the managers or the management. So using
Okay.
the command and control structure for the benefit of so it's a top down. The whole thing is top down.
Right.
Management is about getting other people to do things that they may or may not want to do. Leadership, my definition of leadership is inclusive. I believe, and I've tested it in companies with a few thousand people. We've put this in place. I believe leadership is something every single person in the company, including the guy pushing the broom, every one of them is a leader in some way. And none of them have to be managed. None of them. And we can show you again so many companies that it's not an anomaly anymore. So the difference between the two is basically that managers the assumption behind management. Here's this stupefying thing to me. When researched my first book, the question I asked specifically was, does management make people more productive? Does management of people make people more productive? And it comes back with, 7 million responses. And I started going through those, and I can't find a single bit of research that it supports the idea that managers make people more successful. Not one bit. All of it says, well, leadership is important and starts conflating the two. There's only one study been done that I know of around the idea of managers being important, and it came up with a conclusion that they're not, and that was Google's oxygen study in 2003. They threw all the managers out, and then 3 months later, they brought them all back in because they did it wrong, and then they had to justify their decision to bring them all back, so they did a 2-year study on why managers are important. Well, that's confirmation bias right out of the gate. Let me show you why our new and they came up with 10 things people need at work. Or it was actually 8 to begin with, then they studied it again a few years later. 8 things people need at work, and I agree with all 8 of them. Everybody needs those things. By the way, one of those 8 is not to be micromanaged. That was one of the things they came up with. So here's 8 things people need. They need, infrastructure, they need training, they need, and then they said, therefore, because people need these 8 things, therefore, managers are critical. Now that's just a huge leap of nonsense.
Right.
People need those 8 things, great. Let's ask the question, how could we get them to them? And that becomes fascinating. You realize that managers not only do not get them those things, they stand in the way of them. I think it was work.com or one of those guys did a study like 8 years ago on reasons people quit.
Right.
And it came up with 20. 15 of the reasons people quit directly related to their manager. If you eliminate managers, you eliminate 75% of the reasons people are going to quit right out of the gate. They,
What's the alternative to managers though? So you know of organizations that have managed, or well, let me put that this way, that they've not required managers. What's the model you suggest, or you say that would be a
and by the way, I want to interject this before I answer the question.
sure.
Just this far into the podcast, I'm certain there are people out there saying this guy sounds like chaos and anarchy. So, 'cause that's what it sounds like out of the gate. I can tell you that the companies that have no managers are better organized, more profitable, more procedure driven. I've never seen smoother operation than people who don't have managers.
Yeah, yeah. So that's actually helpful. So I was actually asking of the alternative methods, or the alternatives out there to having a manager hierarchy
So
structure.
one of the alternatives, we have this top-down view of the world that has to do with pyramids, and the
Right.
pyramid means that as a supervisor, I have 4 people working for me, and as a manager, I have 7 supervisors. As a director, I have 7 managers, and as a vice president, I have 7 we have this thing where it's always one person managing multiple others.
Right.
And one of the things that you find out when you get rid of the industrial age factory system model that we're mostly still doing is this statement. Here's a principle that you can take with you that will change your business. Anytime you have an opportunity or an obstacle, like how do we get these people to be productive? That would be an opportunity or an obstacle.
Sure.
Anytime you have one of those, here's how you should approach it. Think people, not person. When I was with Google, they were asking me, how do we get our mojo back? How do we actually get to where we're doing things like we did in the early stages? And I said, well, you got to stop hiring heroic jerks who are, these Steve Jobs that can hang the moon. And instead, you got to figure out how to get people to work together. Well, that sounds too wooey gooey and mushy washy. And so
Sure.
here's how you do that. So let's go back to Google's study that people need 8 things. Well, here's the reality of it. And it's unfair to managers, David. It's the most unfair job we have in America is management because we're asking those people to be gods. They have to be good at 8 things that are pretty much polar opposites. They have to be great at detail. They have to be great at relationships. They have to have a sense of urgency. They have to be patient. I mean, I couldn't find a single human being on the face of the earth who could do more than 4 of the 8 things really well. And what happens? They do the 4 well, they do 1 or 2 really badly, and 2 of them get ignored, and everybody hates them for the 2 things they can't do. And you put somebody else in, and it's a different 2 things they can't do. It's a thankless position. What if we did this? Let's just uh, ask the manager, hey, you're really good at these 4 things or these 3 things. How about if you hang on to those 3 things and you join the team and you become productive as well? So you start making shoes or programming or whatever it is. But you do that, 40% of your time. And you
Right.
use the other 60 or 60%, and you use that to and you use the rest of your time to do those 3 things with the team. And then let's find other people on the team to do the other 4 or 5 things. Because there's on the team of 6 or 8 or 10 people, you're gonna have all 8 of those things covered by 3 or 4 other people. And the rest of
Right.
them don't wanna do anything but be production. So now you got 3 people. or maybe 4 people doing what was one person's job, and they're all doing a little bit less production, but that's okay because the manager has jumped back in and he's doing production or she's doing that. So your production is actually increased. And all 8 of these things are getting done by people who are great at them. Think people, not person.
And what you're saying sounds like this kind of leads into what you told me about managing stuff rather than people. So this manager no longer is a manager of people. Now the manager that you've just moved into the organization, they're focused on the areas of responsibilities that they have strengths, which is not just overseeing a group and micromanaging individuals, but contributing to the group. And now the group is coming up with what to do going forward. Is that kind of the managing stuff versus people?
Yeah, well, we call it participating, or we call it distributed decision making in the participation age. Everybody wants to participate in building a great company, not for you, but with you.
Right.
And if you invite all 8 people on the team to build a great company with you, really, you're gonna let me use my brain? Not in a vacuum, there's no chaos and anarchy in it. There's 8 of us ensuring that it's not a stupid decision anymore, instead of one Dilbertized manager making these hilariously stupid decisions that Scott Adams made millions of dollars off of with Dilbert. So, it's a wonderful opportunity to teach people to be adults at work like they already are at home and take
Right.
on responsibility, not just tasks. So that's a big piece of it. And then what happens is everybody leads in some way, shape, or form, and everybody manages, except nobody manages people. Everybody leads people. And here's the difference. So manage stuff, lead people. That's the mantra.
Right.
Stuff. And why do we do that? Because stuff actually does need to be managed. In 1911, a guy named Frederick Winslow Taylor wrote a paper called Scientific Management. And in that paper, he postulated 2 fatal assumptions about people. Number 1, people are stupid. In the paper, he actually says, quote unquote, "People are so stupid, they more resemble the ox than any other type." If you ever heard this phrase, "That guy's dumb as an ox,"
Dumb-
it came from that paper. So, I mean, what a fatalistic thing to say about the human race. They're all stupid. Here's the second one. They're all lazy. He called it soldiering. Now,
Right.
David, if the majority of people are stupid and lazy, there's only one solution to that. You find the rare, smart, and motivated person, and you lure them over the stupid and lazy ones to force them to work, and thus management was born. The first place management is actually the word manager is used is in Hammurabi's code 5,000 years ago related to slaves. Hey, if you don't want to be there, you do need to have somebody standing over you with a whip managing you. But see,
Right.
I'm stuff. We sat down here and I put my computer down and it's still there. It is stupid and it is lazy and it has to be managed. Processes need to be managed. Trucks, your microphone, it's all stupid and lazy. So we need to manage stuff. But
Right.
I'm not stupid and I'm not lazy. Lead me, give me vision, give me training, give me mentoring, and get the blankety blank out of my way and watch me work.
I'm glad that I mean, that's the dream for somebody who's a leader, or at least for me. So for my own company, like, I'm specifically trying to find people that are gonna be better at what they do, and if I am smarter than them at what they do, then I'm not only dealing with my own limitations, but now I'm also carrying this person that shouldn't be there in the first place,
Well,
and,
and
that's a
I'm sorry, David, you hit on it
no.
right away because this is one of the problems with management. Management of people is nothing more or nothing less than pure, unadulterated codependence. I didn't make this up. Here's a classic definition of codependent. Doing for others what they could or should do for themselves. That's management. And I'm gonna get used to that and actually like it because I have enough decisions to make at home. So you just tell me what to do and I'll be a human doing instead of a human being. So it's one of them, and then you get mad because nobody thinks. It's like they're all
Right.
dependent on me. Well, you who created that rule? You did.
Well, and that makes sense. Why it probably makes sense as to why you chose the name of that book about by giving humans their brains back, by giving people their brains back. So makes a lot of sense to me. I'm interested for me. It's like, oh, this makes a lot of sense on a very small scale, right? Like, I have a small business, I run a small team, and by running that team, my whole purpose is to, like, I see my whole purpose as enabling them and empowering them with what they need and then getting out of their way as quickly as possible. It's easy for me to imagine that kind of environment working well in a small, like,
Yeah.
environment. I think most people would think of it like micro, that works, and then people would say, "Well, at scale, that couldn't possibly work," right? It's just too big.
Yeah. And again, this is where data I just have so much fun with people because everyone on this podcast right now is emotional. "Oh, wait a minute. No, I gotta manage people." I get it. I was there. We're all being emotional about this. Here's the data. Again, the 12 I think 12 of the 15 companies that have been on the Fortune, best places to work list for 30 years are all companies without managers. Nobody gets managed. I had the problems with my whole concept here. He said, if there's ever an airplane made by self-management, make sure it's labeled, I'm not getting on it. Well, GE Aviation has 8 factories for making engines for like one third of all the big planes in the world. This is a
Right.
very large corporation. There are no managers in those 8 factories. None, 0, duck eggs.
That's
And
really interesting. I think people would have a hard time imagining a factory setting with no managers. That's impressive.
well, and yet that's where it started. One of the most famous examples is a company in California. It's a tomato paste manufacturer. And then when there were 7 or 8 of them, they decided they would never have managers. Now they are the largest tomato paste manufacturer in the nation, maybe in the world. And there are no managers in the place, and they've been doing this for 40 years. Uh, I can give you in any industry, including government, places where people have stopped having managers and it always works better. There's less first of all, you don't have the management tax because managers are useless. We assume that if the only reason we have managers, we know this, David, the only reason we have managers, well, because the 8 stupid and lazy people won't work unless they have somebody lording over them with a whip. I can give you plenty of data that actually says when we remove those people, remove the managers, the people blossom and are more productive. All the data is on the side of making sure that we can bring this to fruition. And it just takes so long. We don't like change. The pneumatic hammer was invented in like 1890 and people weren't using it till 1990 or something. We don't like change. Even in the face of it works better. COVID's a great example. When everybody went home, you could see all the CEOs were dazed and confused.
Right.
I don't understand why how this is working. And then when the first excuse came that they could bring him haul him back into the office, they did. There's no data to support it. Doesn't matter. We
I'm so
don't
glad you brought that up. That's probably the for me, like, I'm not involved in really massive companies and trying to imagine that structure working in a distributed, decision-making platform. But when I'm in a space where I'm talking to my own clients or people that run even regional businesses, and they're trying to figure out, "Well, how do I get a remote team member to do what I know they're supposed to do? How do I know they're doing what they're supposed to?" And the answer, for me, it's super intuitive. But for some reason, it's still harder for me to connect it to your structure, which is you don't manage the person, you create, like, you manage the data, like follow, like, what's the output? That's what you manage, the output, and get alignment on what that output should be. And if the output's not there, then the data is going to fire them. You don't have to fire them. They didn't do their job, and everybody can tell.
yeah,
And you don't need a manager for that. You need alignment, and you need systems, and you need structure in place, and then everybody needs to be operating inside the system. And you don't have to have, and the system shouldn't be that you're sitting behind them in an office. That's not a system.
no. So Haier Corporation, Haier, the largest white goods manufacturer in the world. Stoves, refrigerators, microwaves. They're bigger than Google. They have like 90,000 full-time and 80,000 part-time people.
Okay.
They're based in China, which is a highly top-down pyramid scheme, you know, in a hugely bureaucratic. I'm giving you trying to get rid of all the excuses for why we can't do this.
Right.
And they implemented this like 15 years ago, and the company blew up all over the world. There's not a single manager in those 160,000 people. Nobody manages anybody. And it's so crazy when they've given the teams such autonomy that you can actually here in Denver, if you're using the higher corporation accounting team, and
Right.
you don't like what they're doing for you, number 1, you're paying them out of everybody's a profit center. Everything, maintenance, accounting, marketing, it's all a profit center. So accounting goes out to all the other people in hire in Denver and says, "Hey, we're going to give you accounting services. How's much it costs?" And if you don't like it, you can go get somebody else. You
It's
can
like its
fire
own it's like its own economy, it's like its own environment, like an organism.
they're all profit centers. And so if you made them all profit centers, most of these accounting, marketing, maintenance, so many of these things basically can give you the finger because they're protected.
Right.
Well, they're not in a higher corporation and they don't need to be. Nobody ever fires them because they know they could be fired. So they do their jobs and they do them with excellence. It's the largest white goods manufacturer in the world. And I could just you give me an industry and I'll give you a company, a large one that is functioning without managers and great leadership. And here's one of the beauties of this management is about 7 to 10 people. That's all you can manage. A leader can actually lead 50 people. So think of how much thinner your middle layers are. All that fat, that management tax goes away.
And when you say that, the scalability, that's I'm just gonna try to see if I can play this out and understand. You're basically saying that the leader, what they're doing is they're focusing on empowering people. They're not like going through all their tasks and managing their individual tasks. Because at that level, they're basically overseeing, micromanaging to a degree, to a depth that they could only manage people.
So yeah, there's about 10 major principles in this. One of them is leaders focus on results. You already said this.
Right.
Leaders focus on results, managers focus on process. So let's get the people because process does need to be managed. But why
Right.
does some manager who never runs the process, why should they come up with the process? How about if we ask the 8 people, first of all, let's do this together. I'm not going to tell you what result we need to. I'm the leader of 50 people, and so I got 7 or 8 teams under me. I'm going to go
Yep.
to team A and say, okay, guys, what result do you guys think we should have on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? Financially, whatever. Give us the and we're gonna work on those together until we're all happy that that's really gonna be the thing that the company needs. And so we're gonna come up with that together because one of the other principles is input equals ownership. And if you just tell people what to do and you don't give them any input, any ability to have input, it's gonna be the Dilbert Society. Can you believe what the manager told us to do this time? Let's go do it. Is he gonna look like a fool?
That's right.
So we have to we look at it from that perspective. We give it to the teams to do, and then we say, okay, if that's the result we want, now let's together design a process that will get us that result. And they're so much better at this than the manager because the manager hasn't run the process for 9 years. You forgot what the process was. But the leader
That's
can
right.
be involved in that and can make sure that whatever they come up with works for the whole company. So that he or she brings the strategic piece of that to this decision-making process. So they come up with it, they own it, and if it's broken, they fix it. If the Dilbert Society manager comes up with it and it's broken, they just laugh.
Yep.
So I
My I have both my parents worked throughout my whole life in a factory, and I remember all growing up throughout my entire childhood hearing how they would hire a manager right out of college that would come in and tell them how to do their job that they've never seen or don't have any idea how it's supposed to be done. And my parents were just like, well, we have to do it, and things are gonna fall apart, and they're gonna break really expensive equipment, and that's just how things are ran, and the organization just continued that process, and I think largely without having an understanding that there's another process that could be done. I don't know that people recognize the ability or the options out there. It's hard for me because I didn't until you brought this up at scale, I wouldn't have thought of me doing what I do with my own team at a scale like that.
yeah, so here's another principle you just alliterated. Managers tell, leaders ask. This is probably the biggest one. We think managers and leaders tell. No, they don't. Leaders ask, "Hey, what do you think we should do? And what do you need? And what resources and how do you need to be helped? And you got what you need here and what's the result we should." Leaders ask. They use the Socratic method. Managers say, "Here's the process, here's the result, here's the tools, now go do your job."
Yep.
Managers tell. And that's what the kid out of college did. He thinks that's his job is to go tell people who've been doing this for 30 years how to do the job because that's how he adds value by telling, because 'cause they're stupid and lazy.
Well, I definitely resonate with this through my experience with just listening to my parents in a factory setting through every interaction I've had. And yet somehow it still feels like it's difficult for me even knowing this intuitively as we had talked about versus I guess logically. It's still hard for me to shake the idea that, oh yeah, that's actually not necessary. And it intuitively makes sense that you would remove effectively wasteful management, or like you had mentioned, like the management tax, so that you can get out of people's way and give them their brain back. I would actually love for you to tell us a little bit. I know you said you've recently released a new book, which also sounds like it's counter and counter
Kind of,
logical.
yeah, it's kind of logical. Yeah.
Um, yeah, could you tell me about the new book that you've released
Yeah,
recently?
the book is called Sell Less, Earn More, and it's the anti-sales book. Again, most of what we learned about sales comes from the industrial age factory system, and we're still doing it. Cold calls, one of the
Right.
dumbest things we've ever done. Seth Godin, in the '90s said, "Stop doing that," and we're still doing permission marketing, but we don't know what it means to build relationships. This book is the anti-sales book. It's the cure for the common cold call. It's for anybody who pretends to like sales, who knows in their heart that what they're doing is just not helpful to the people around them and to the world around them. Hey, I got one of these. Stop me when you see something you like. We're constantly selling. My encouragement would be serve, don't sell, and you will make a bucket load more money. So for small business owners who hate selling, don't try and get to like it. Stop reading books by people who love sales, who want you to love it too. You don't have to. We can get you to where you can just stop doing sales. Stop talking to strangers. That's the nature of this book. You should never have to talk to another stranger in your life. And if you do it right, you'll make a lot more money than pounding on people's doors when they didn't want you to.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that book as well. I've got several of your books I still have to get through. The first one being the Rehumanizing the Workforce and Giving People Their Brains Back. Thanks for covering that topic as well as lots of topics that feed into that. Before we go, is there what do you like to read for pleasure? The non like professional development side of you that just enjoys getting lost in something and
Yeah,
not
I
turning your
read
brain off.
yeah, I read a lot of I don't even wanna use the word self-development because I don't believe in that necessarily the way it has evolved. I read books that are highly practical about how I can become a better human being. Very practical, tactile stuff about, like how to breathe, and why and what you should do when you go to a gym, and why you should go to a gym, and and how to get your head straight in the morning, and so very practical things that will make me a better human being on a daily basis, that will help me grow and become a better, bigger presence in the world around me. I love reading that kind of stuff.
What's one of those that you either read most recently or you're reading now?
The Myth of Normal. Great book, and it basically talks about how every one of us has been traumatized our whole lives. Nobody's normal, and nobody's abnormal. And the guy with the addiction, well, I have an addiction to popcorn. Man, I need my popcorn almost every night. It's like a big hug. That's an addiction, except it's adorable. Alcoholism isn't. So the
Right.
myth of normal, another one, Vanderkook wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. Fantastic book that shows that all those things that we have experienced in our life, you can almost pin most of your diseases to things that have happened to you in the past. And so much of it is in our bodies, it's not in our heads. And there's lots of ways to get that out of there and get it fixed. So those kinds of books, I just eat them alive.
I need to look up that book myself. I'm focused on my own health, and that one actually sounds really interesting. I can tell like injuries and things that I've done; those things stick with you. I didn't think that way when I was 20. Now I feel like I'm only thinking that way. So thank you for those recommendations. Thank you for your time on this. It's been great chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to having another chat with you again soon.
David, it's a pleasure. Keep going.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Lead Smarter. And thank you to the partners and sponsors who believe in our mission to evolve ourselves to elevate others. Speaking of elevating others, if you liked this episode, please be sure to like, follow, subscribe, and share. It would mean a lot to me and the team that works so hard behind the scenes so we can all learn together. And of course, thank you to the expert guests who kindly join us as generous guides on our journey to lead smarter.